welcome back to Daily Bible with Chris. So glad to have you joining me again. This is our part 2 and follow-up from yesterday's Daily Bible reading where we were in Isaiah 11 through 15. So if you've not already watched that video, you'll have to go back like 2 videos to Isaiah 11 through 15, that Daily Bible reading. I would encourage you to go back and do that first, or open your Bible and read those 5 chapters before sitting down for this commentary where we just go through and try to give some explanation and some insight into the readings here of our chapters. So encourage you to do that first, then come back and watch this as well. Also, if you've not already hit that subscribe button, by now you know what to do, and as well as hit that like button and the notification bell so you're notified of daily uploads and content, specifically our daily Bible readings, and then when we're able to, also daily Bible commentary follow-up videos. So we're going to jump right in. Of course, a reminder, Isaiah is the prophet here. We've kind of established that previously. Isaiah is prophesying both to the nation of Israel up until the time of its exile into Assyria, as well as the nation of Judah up until a time when he is killed. He is killed. The tradition is that he was cut in half, sawed in half. That's how he dies. And Isaiah is going to prophesy about 100 years prior to the final destruction of Judah at the hands of the Babylonian Empire. So during his time, Assyria is not to be confused with Syria. Assyria is the power in the world, but eventually they're going to be replaced by the Babylonians. And so when we left off in chapter 10, of course, it's describing the ultimate destruction. The nation of Israel itself will be those 10. Now, just keep in mind as well, just a reminder, I feel like I have to do a refresher just to make sure everybody's up to speed. Remember, during this time, we have 2 kingdoms. We have Israel at this point. At one point, we had a united Israel under King Saul, King David, King Solomon. But after Solomon passed away, his son Rehoboam takes the throne. There's a civil war. There's a break. The northern kingdom of 10 tribes of Israel separate. They become the nation of Israel. Eventually, their capital will be in Samaria. And then we have the 2 southern tribes of Benjamin and Judah. They become the nation of Judah, or the southern kingdom. So northern kingdom, southern kingdom, Israel, Judah. That's where we're at here. And we're seeing here the Assyrians are going to lead the 10 northern tribes into exile. They're going to lay waste to Israel. Israel will cease to exist. They will come to the point of nearly destroying Judah as well. I mean, they're going to do a lot of, initially, Assyria is going to be a help to Judah against Israel and against Syria. But eventually they're going to turn their focus against Judah, against the king there, Ahaz and such. And they're going to pillage a lot of Judah, get right up to the gates of Jerusalem before God intervenes. He said he would protect he said he would protect Judah, protect Jerusalem, that the Assyrians would not destroy it. It was not time for that yet. And they're turned away. God sends an angel. We're going to see this mentioned in one of our readings we're going to discuss, one of the chapters. But he sends an angel to confuse, and the Assyrians get into a kind of this fight, and they go fighting each other, and 185,000 men are killed. And in fact, so the army is basically destroyed. Assyria has to limp back home, and eventually the Assyrian king himself is murdered, I believe, by his own children sometime later for his failure in Judah. So that's our setup. So let's jump right in here because we've got a lot to cover, and I want to kind of get through this as quickly but informatively as I possibly can. Chapter 11. So at the end of chapter 10, we have the picture of Judah being left kind of like a forest, and there's nothing but a stump left. So just picture this great, beautiful tree, and someone has cut in and come in and cut it down right down to the stump, and all that's left is a stump. And the idea is that the stump appears to be dead. There's nothing left. There's no life. That's the picture. So we pick up in chapter 11. We see this prophetic future description. Then a shoot or a branch will grow from the stump of Jesse. So again, that idea, the stump of the what's remaining of these stumps of the 12, of the tribes, they've all been cut down, they're left behind. But of the tribe here of Judah, in the line of Jesse, all of a sudden new growth is going to come out. A small shoot, a branch is going to grow up out of that. Now notice it's interesting that it doesn't say the stump of David. It says the stump of Jesse. Jesse was David's father. So I think that's interesting, even though Messiah is coming. So this is a prophetic sign of Messiah who's going to come. He would be from the house of David. He's going to sit on the throne of David. But we have here the idea he is referred back to Jesse, the humbleness of Jesse versus the greatness of David. And so this shoot, we see this description of the Messiah in many other places where he's referred to this branch, this shoot. It's going to come. So this is prophesying of the future king of a Messiah who's coming to sit on the throne of his father David, this Davidic type king of his, and it's a description of his reign. And then we notice in verse 2, it gives us a description of the spirit that's going to be upon him. This is referred to as the Spirit of the Lord. It's going to rest on him. It will give him a spirit of wisdom and understanding, counsel and strength, knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. Well, we know the knowledge is the beginning of the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. So we have knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. So he has a spirit of wisdom, a spirit of counsel. So he's going to come in the spirit of like a Solomon type, who was the wisest who to ever live. But he's also going to come in strength and power, also like a David, like a Solomon, David who was a mighty man of war, and such, and knowledge, but also a reverence of the fear of the Lord. Even though the Messiah is coming as a God-man, deity, God in the flesh, God with us, Emmanuel. He also has a reverence for his Father, God the Father, even though they are one. He declares that our Father in heaven is holy, and we are to holy and hallowed is his name. So this idea, the Spirit of the Lord, and that's this idea. Notice all the times too in the scriptures where we'll see the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. Even a person like Saul had moments where the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. It's this idea of God's power and God's hand upon him. And so this one's going to come with the Spirit of the Lord upon him. And then the next couple of verses 3-5, we see this description that he will be a righteous judge that judges and rules rightly and justly. And notice he won't judge by his eyes and he won't judge by his ears. He won't judge by what necessarily he sees and hears, because maybe those things can trick us, right? We can be told something and that it may bias our judgment. No, he's going to be a good judge, a good ruler, unlike some of the previous kings who had been bribed, who had been shown favoritism or showed, no justice to certain people because of maybe their economic status, their financial status, their class status. No, he's going to judge perfectly. Justice will be blind. In other words, what he sees and what he hears will not impact him. He's going to judge rightly. And then we see this description in verses 6-9 of the reign of the Messiah once he comes. And again, this is the idea of not of Jesus's first coming. This is a description of his second coming, when he physically comes back to earth and places his feet on the Mount of Olives, and he marches into Jerusalem and sits on the throne there in Jerusalem. His reign is going to be a time of peace and a time of transformation. Even nature itself. Nature has never been the same since the fall. Because of sin, things changed. Before the fall, man and animals and beasts of the field and such could interact without any fear. You didn't fear a lion killing you. You didn't fear a bear mauling you prior to the fall. But after the fall, things change, nature changes, and now all of a sudden, these beasts are now wild, and we have to fear them. Yes, they can be trained, but you always have to fear animals. All animals can be deadly and such. But prior to that, and so we have this idea that that natural situation that was at the beginning in the garden is going to be put back into place. And now all of a sudden we have this description of the wolf laying down with a lamb. Of course, a wolf's going to kill a lamb normally. The leopard's going to lie down with a goat. The calf, the young lion, the fattened calf, they're going to sit together. These things that you see on the Nature Channel that's always hunting each other, now all of a sudden they're going to get along with each other. There'll be no more of that any longer. And we have this picture that even a little child will lead these animals, and the child will have no fear of the animal. I sing from time to time. Just a little revelation for any of you out there. I'm a big Elvis fan. That's why I have the sideburns. And I sing and perform sometimes doing Elvis songs and Elvis gospel. And of course, one of Elvis's gospel songs that he did was an old spiritual called "There Will Be Peace in the Valley." And the second line of that song talks about the bear will be gentle and the wolf will be tame. The lion shall lay down by the lamb, and the beast from the wild shall be led by a child. And I'll be changed from the creature that I am. That verse is speaking of this prophecy of the lion, the lamb, all laying down together without any fear. And so we see that they're not going to destroy all of these. They're going to be full of the knowledge. Notice they're going to be, nature's going to be transformed, and everyone will have knowledge, final, true, relational knowledge of the Lord. And they're going to come together at his holy mountain there in Jerusalem. And then verses 10 through 12, we see a regathering of Israel. Even at this time, even though there's many that have come back to the nation of Israel, not all Jews have come back there. And so during this time, on that day, the root of Jesse, the stump of Jesse, Jesus that we know now, he's going to stand, his banner is going to fly for the peoples. Notice it's for the peoples, not just the Jews, right? The nations are going to look to him for guidance. Why? Because he has a spirit of wisdom and understanding and counsel, right? And his resting place will be glorious. There'll be glory to him. And he's going to extend his hand to not only to the nations, to the Gentile nations are going to seek after him, but he's going to reach out his hands to the nations where there are still remnants of Jews and Israelites there at that time, and they're going to come home. There's going to be, in essence, a second exodus of the Jew. We had the first exodus out of Egypt. We're going to see another exodus back into the land to be there, and he's going to lift up his hand there, and they're going to be drawn back to him. They're going to seek him out, and he's going to bring them. They've been scattered over the years since the time of the fall of Judah and Israel and Judea. And so there's going to be a final gathering of them together. And then we have this showing of there's going to be peace. Notice verses 13, 14 talks about the envy between Ephraim and Judah. They're no longer going to be harassing and envying each other. There's no longer going to be desires to throw Israel into the sea. There will be peace finally. There'll be no worry of war any longer from these natural enemies of Israel. All of these things, they're going to be subject under Jesus's rule and reign as the Messiah. And notice that naturally there are going to be some places where there are waters that are going to dry up and make a highway in the desert, highways there that people can literally walk on to get back to Israel. And so we see this, there's going to be a highway for the remnant of his people who survive so that they can make their way back into Israel as they came up from the land of Egypt. This beautiful picture of what will come. We know he's already come fulfilling it as the Messiah in his first coming, but he's going to fulfill the rest of this when he returns a second time. And then chapter 12, we have a beautiful song. It's awesome in here. I think we saw in chapter 5 as well, this idea of a song written by Isaiah. And there's some beautiful songs. See, this is a song of praise related to, this is a kind of a coda kind of added on to the previous chapter. During this time of all that happening, notice we have this picture of this worshiper. It says, on that day you will say, okay, the person's going to say, I will give thanks to the Lord. Although you were angry with me, your anger has turned away from me and you have comforted me. There's going to be this praise of God, praise of the Lord for all that he has done, even though he has judged, even though he has disciplined and chastened those he loves, even though he was angry just for a moment. And in a sense, most of his anger was poured out on Christ, obviously on the cross for our sins. But there are times when we're displeased, and there's times when he has to correct us and such. And so we, just as a parent does, right? But it doesn't mean they don't love us anymore. And he says, your anger is turned away. You have comforted me. I thought about this too, that famous Psalm 23. Your rod, the description of the shepherd and the sheep, your rod and your staff, what do? They comfort me, right? There's that idea, God brings comfort. The rod and the staff was there not only as a sign of the leadership of the shepherd, but that rod and staff was there to correct and bring back the stray lamb off. They may be straying off. He pulled him back. In some cases, he might even have to physically break the leg of a lamb using one of those, that staff, that rod, to keep that lamb from running away so that it would stay with the shepherd. But the idea was those things that were instruments of discipline, they brought comfort to the person there in Psalm 23. And I think you can make a similar parallel here as well. And then verse 2, we have this idea, the person is thanking the Lord. And why? Because of his salvation. I trust in him. He is my strength. He is my song. He has become my salvation. So we give thanksgiving to the Lord. We trust him. Then you will joyfully draw water from the springs of salvation. Jesus said, I am the water of life. Those who take a drink of me will never thirst again. So we have this picture. And of course, in the desert where it's very arid and very dry, water is so key. And we see that this living water that he has given. And so there's this idea, the water of life that we get at the time of salvation that we have, it lasts forever. And then we have this proclamation: give thanks to the Lord, proclaim his name, that God is great, that he make his works known among the peoples, among the nations, declare that his name is exalted. His name is to be lifted up above all other names. And then we have in 5 and 6, a call to sing. This sounds very much like a psalm. This could fit right in the psalm. Sing to the Lord. Why? Because he's done glorious things. Let this be known throughout the earth. Cry out and sing, citizen of Zion. So, of course, this is a Jewish person calling out to the Jews, those living there in Zion, those living there in Jerusalem during the time of Jesus' reign. Sing to him this song, because he is the Holy One of Israel. He is among you in his greatness. What a beautiful song of praise. And then we begin here in chapter 13, these series of pronouncements or burdens or judgments against nations. And we're going to start here in chapter 3 with a pronouncement against Babylon. And just so, when you understand this, these are both imminent judgments, meaning they're going to happen in that time frame or shortly thereafter. Obviously, we know that the judgment against Babylon is going to come long after Isaiah has passed off the scene, but it's also seen as future judgment against this system that is referred to as Babylon. And I will explain that. But we see in verse 1 a pronouncement against Babylon from Isaiah, son of Amos. So we see this future judgment that God and this is written in such a way that more than likely this never made its way to Babylon. They probably didn't read it in Babylon, but it was written by Isaiah, I think, primarily for the people of Israel to read and know that, yes, God's judgment is going to come against us, Israel, Judah, but know that even if the Babylonians that are wicked, God is going to judge them as well. It's not just us. He will judge them, and he will leave a remnant of us there. And so we have in verses 2 through 8, we have a description of the future, a destruction of Babylon. Now, just so you understand, Babylon was a power at this time, but Assyria was number one. Babylon would have been kind of a distant number two at this point, but they're getting stronger and stronger. And of course, eventually, Babylon overthrows Assyria. It's Babylon that will lead Judah into exile. But it's Babylon that God is going to give over to another nation, another empire known as the Medes and the Persians under a king by the name of Cyrus. You know him historically, if you paid attention in ancient civilization or ancient world history. He's known as Cyrus the Great, right? And it's Cyrus in verses 2 through 8. We have this description that the day of the Lord is going to come against Babylon and that they will be overthrown by another army. And this army is going to be under Cyrus. We even see this described in the book of Daniel. Daniel describes that Belshazzar, the king in Babylon at the time, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, he is wicked and he's partying. And at this party, God appears to him, gives a sign. Daniel pronounces it that tonight the kingdom is going to be taken away from you. You've been found wanting. You've been weighed in the balance. Unbeknownst to Belshazzar, the Medes and Persians have found their way into the city. They've been able to dam off some water, lowering, of course, Babylon sat on two mighty rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. They're able to dam up the water there, get the water level down, that the army could march under one of the gates of the city, and they come in and they destroy Babylon in one night. And all of a sudden, Babylon ceases to exist as an empire. It is now the Medes and the Persian Empire. And so we see that here, that this is a future invasion. And then in verses kind of 9 through 16, we see this description of the day of the Lord is coming. The day of the Lord is not necessarily one day, but it's mentioned many times, but it's a future idea of a future judgment that God is coming. There's going to come a day when he's going to come with his burning anger to make the earth a desolation, destroy its sinners. He's coming to judge the world. And so this is both an imminent judgment that's happening on the nation of Babylon, but it's also proclaiming a future judgment. And you read here verses 9 through 16, it talks about how he's going to destroy the wicked, to put an end to the pride and the arrogant, humiliate. I'm going to get rid of these people. I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to make the heavens and the earth tremble, shake the foundations with my wrath. And there's be much destruction and death. All of these things are going to come, and we know these things happen. When Jesus returns, there is the great battle of Armageddon, when he defeats the armies of Satan and his Antichrist and the beast and such. He's going to destroy that. There's going to be so much blood and destruction and such as he comes to lay waste. They're going to be dashed. And so looking at all of these things, they're going to be cut down. All these people are going to be destroyed. It's an awesome, awesome time. And then, the idea is this is describing a future event. So just so you understand, in prophecy, Babylon refers to an actual place. There was a city, Babylon. There was the Babylonian Empire, certainly. But then we see in like the New Testament, Revelation and such, we see this reference to a Babylon, which is kind of representative of the world system, a world governmental system, a system of financial system and wickedness and such, where it's just wicked. And we see that when it's referencing that God is going to come against Babylon, it's coming against this wickedness of the world. So it's like this one world system that's referred to prophetically as Babylon. And so we see this idea that God is going to destroy the Babylon during the time of Isaiah, but he's also going to one day destroy, and we see that in Revelation. It says, Babylon, Babylon, oh Babylon, you have fallen. We're going to see this idea that Jesus is going to come to destroy Babylon, this center of wickedness and idolatry, and he's going to set things right. And then at the end of the chapter 17 through 22, we see this description again that Babylon, the city itself, the current city, so we're kind of bouncing back and forth. We're at current, future, now we're back to current, that he's stirring up the Medes against them, and who cannot be bought off with silver and gold. Remember, bribes are things that people would often do. We know King Ahaz of Judah tried to bribe the Assyrians to keep them and make them an ally, but eventually didn't work. The Medes cannot be bought off. And so we see that Babylon, verse 19, the jewel of the kingdoms, the glory is going to be like Sodom and Gomorrah. It's going to be laid waste. Now, it takes some time for this to happen, but eventually it comes to a point where Babylon is no longer even inhabited. And you can go there. It's in modern day Iraq. You can go there and see the remnants of a lot of Babylon, and it's grown up. No one, there may be people who live around it, but it's not, it's just destroyed. It took hundreds of years. It went away. And so he's going to paint this picture, this thing that was one of the wonders of the world. Remember, again, I'm judging you on your world history. There was the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon. It's one of the great 7 wonders of the ancient world, right? It was one of the places to go. It was beautiful. I mean, it had these high walls. I mean, the story is they used to have chariot races on top of the walls because they were so thick they could race chariots on top of them. Not sure I'd want to do that, but that's the story that I've always heard. And now great Babylon has fallen into waste. And so the idea historically, it has happened, and we know eventually it will happen again in the future. And then chapter 14, we have this idea. So God has done all this to Babylon, and as a sign to the nation of Israel that even though he's angry with them, they're going to face judgment. We see in verse that he still has compassion. Verse 1, for the Lord will have compassion on Jacob and will choose Israel again. He will settle them on their own land. The idea that all of this destruction, this exile, all these things have happened, but God in his mercy is going to pronounce judgment against Babylon, and the people will be allowed to come back into the land. And we know during the time of the Medes and the Persians, during the time of Darius, Cyrus and Darius and such, there was the beginning of the return into the land under people like Nehemiah and Ezra and other leaders of that time. And so God preserved that remnant, and he allows them to go back in and to settle back into the land. And so we see that happening here. And then verses 3 through 8, we have the celebration, kind of the rejoicing over the fall of the Babylonian king. And of course, the Babylonian king at the time when Babylon falls is Belshazzar, as I just mentioned. He is the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar was king when Judah is conquered and led into captivity. And so we see this description of the people celebrating the fall of the Babylonian king. And this, some also draw a parallel between, there's disagreement in this, but we see this idea, they're singing a song of contempt about the king of Babylon, that the oppressor is quieted now. His raging has become quiet. The Lord has broken the staff, the scepter of him. He struck the people in anger. He has subdued the nations. The whole earth is now calm. Why? Because the Babylonian king is no more. And so they're rejoicing. Even nature is rejoicing that he has been laid low. And so we see that. And some will also make the comparison that this may also be referring to the eventual destruction of the ruler of the Babylonian system in the future, who is, of course, Satan. Satan is confined to earth in the later days, and he is confined there. And he is seen as kind of this king of the Babylon that God is going to destroy. That may or may not be the case, at least in this phrasing. I think another place in the scripture, it's undeniable. And then we see in verse 9, we see that hell itself, Sheol, hell is eager to accept the body of the deposed wicked king and to devour him, for lack of a better term. There's this description of the king is thrown into hell, and the splendor has brought you down to Sheol, along with the music of your harps. Maggots are spread out under you, and worms cover you. Jesus described hell as this place where the worm does not die. That there's fire, and there's brimstone, there's pain, and there's anguish, and there's separation, and this idea that these worms and maggots do not die. And so we kind of see a description here. It's a horrible place to be. So we see the splendor of the king of Babylon now thrown into this awful place of hell for punishment and judgment. And then and then in verse 12, we see the fall of Lucifer. This description of the fall of Lucifer, which can be a description of the fall, obviously, of Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, but it's also a description of the fall of Satan. Lucifer was once an angel, one of the cherubim of God. He was known as the son of the morning star, the shining morning star, his glory of the morning star. That's kind of his idea. And Satan falls. And Satan has a series of falls, right? He falls when he tries to take over heaven. He's cast out. There's a fall where he is there's falls where he's finally kicked out of the presence of God. Even during the book of Job, we know that Satan had access to heaven. He would come give reports, but there's going to be a point where that will no longer be. There'll be the time Satan will be thrown into the bottomless pit during the time of Jesus's millennial reign. During those 1,000 years, he is bound in a bottomless pit. He can't get out. He can't do anything. And then he is allowed to come out one last time. We have this final showdown. He's finally destroyed, and finally he's cast into the lake of fire, into hell forever and ever. And so this description is describing that final fall. You've fallen from the heavens, you destroyer of nations, you've been cut down to the ground. You said to yourself, and this was back when he originally stood against God, and every time he stood against God, I will ascend to the heavens. I will set up my throne. Remember, contrast that with Isaiah chapter 6, where we saw God sitting on the throne, right? Now, Satan, Lucifer, I will sit on the throne. I will be like the Most High. I will do all these things. And what does it lead to? It leads him to being cast into the hell of Sheol. And so he is ultimately there forever and ever. And then let me see here, sorry. And then verse 16 and 17, we see again, the nations, they're going to marvel at the fall of Babylon's king. They're going to look at you. And again, this would be looking at Belshazzar, but I think also looking at Satan. The nations will marvel at that Satan has finally been thrown down and is no more. All the nations they're gonna lie in splendor. The king himself of Babylon, he's even dug up out of his grave and thrown around as if he was a worthless little branch. Contrast that, like a worthless branch. But remember, we read earlier about the stump, or the shoot of Jesse, the one, Jesus, the branch. He is not worthless. He is a glorified branch. But we see here Belshazzar, but also potentially Lucifer, referred to as a worthless branch. And so we have that. And then we have, for the rest of it, from 24 on, we have a announcement of judgment against Assyria, that God is going to judge Assyria, and that just by his thinking of it, it will come to pass as I have purposed, or as I have thought, so it will be. God is going to stretch out his hand against Assyria. Assyria is going to be destroyed when they come against Jerusalem, as I already mentioned, when his angel destroys 185,000 of his troops, and eventually they are defeated by the Babylonians. And then there's a warning against Philistia, where the Philistines are, that they're not to gloat too much over what's happened to Israel and Judah, and not to try to take advantage of this opportunity to strike at them, because otherwise God will take care of them as well. And then we come to chapter 15. We have a pronouncement against Moab. Moab, of course, was an enemy of Israel. Moab is named after its founder, who was called Moab, who was the son of one of the illicit sexual encounters between Lot and his daughter. If you remember, when they flee from Sodom and Gomorrah, his two daughters get him drunk, and they both sleep with him. They both become impregnated by him. One of those daughters gives birth to a son by the name of Moab, and Moab founds the Moabite people. And they're constantly a thorn in the flesh. They're in some of that territory that when the Jews come into the nation, they drive them out, but eventually they've been slowly encroaching back into territories that were not theirs any longer. And so for the most part, they are enemies. Now, it's interesting, when we study the book of Ruth, Ruth was a Moabitess. She was from Moab. And so there had been some intermarrying between Moab, Ruth and Moabites, and the Jews themselves, the Israelites and such. And we see that Ruth is seen as this beautiful picture, Ruth and Boaz. She has a redeemer, a kinsman redeemer who redeems her. And so it's interesting that even this woman who was from a nation that was an enemy, she ends up being one of the part of the line that leads to David, that ultimately leads to Jesus. It's a beautiful picture how God can work even in spite of conflicts and enemies and such. This beautiful picture of even a Moabite girl can be part of God's plan for the redemption of mankind. But nonetheless, Moab has been a constant like thorn in the flesh there, an enemy of and so we're going to see here this description of the fact that the Moabite cities are going to fall. There's going to be a night attack. They're going to come against them. They're going to fall. Their soldiers are going to fall. They're going to flee. And they're going to flee to a city called Zoar. Zoar is the city where Lot and his daughters fled to after they left Sodom and Gomorrah. So it's kind of like going back to that story a little bit. They're going to flee there. And ultimately, God is going to overthrow the nation there of Moab. His judgment is going to be against them. Most of them are destroyed. Most of their soldiers are destroyed. There's a cry that goes out from the people. They're this little remnant that's there. And ultimately, God is going to send destruction upon them. And we see at the end of the chapter, God sends a lion for those who escape from Moab and for the survivors in the land. The waters are full of blood. I will bring on Dibon even more than this. In other words, his judgment is harsh against them for what they have done over the years against you, and he is practically going to wipe them out. And that's where we leave chapter 15. So hopefully that helped you a little bit with that. We'll try to get our next commentary up for our reading that was for today. Maybe tonight. Hopefully tonight, if not, perhaps sometime tomorrow. But God bless you. Hope that helps you understand a little bit what we're reading in the context of what we're reading. Love to hear from you. Love to hear a question or comment or anything of that nature. And if I don't know it, and there's a possibility of that, because I certainly don't know as much as I desire to know about God's word, but that helps me to grow as well. So certainly send the questions. If I don't know, I'll find out from someone who does. All right. God bless you. We'll see you next time.